Tonight, I will be telling some true horror stories from around the internet. Stories of stalkers, break-ins, and more. These are real encounters involving real people, so this is a fair warning that these topics could be triggering to some. If you have a story you'd like to have shared with the channel, it can be submitted to reddit.com/r/slumberreads. Stay safe out there, and as always, I hope you all have a great night. So, back in November 2020, I was in and out of hospital with testicular torsion 8 times altogether. Because why permanently fix a medical issue when you can temporarily fix it, I guess. Thanks NHS. And on my last time at one of the hospitals, I had called a taxi to go home. But it would take about 30 to 40 minutes to get to me because it was a Saturday in a city. Since there was going to be a bit of a wait, I decided to sit down in a bench/garden area just in front of the hospital. It was 3 a.m., about 0 degrees Celsius, and I had been awake for 36 hours at that point. My taxi was on its way, and I just sat cross-legged on the bench, headphones on and nicotine keeping me alive. Everything was all fine until after 10 minutes, I noticed a guy very clearly walking directly towards me. He was stumbling a bit, so I just assumed he was drunk. As he got on level with me, he stopped right in front of me and said something that I didn't hear. I looked up and said, "What? Sorry, I had music on." As I pulled them off and he looked me dead in the eye and just said, "I could fucking batter you right now." Of everything I was expecting him to say, that wasn't on the list, so it caught me off guard. I tried just disarming him with humor by saying, "I don't doubt it." Which did work, thank God, because he would have absolutely pummeled me into the ground. And every time I said that or something similar, he'd just say, "I could batter you. I want to deck you right here, right now, and I could take you in a fight." Just to recall a few of them. After his anger had toned down, he sat on the bench next to me and started generally drunk rambling about his family and his friends, and, very specifically, his best friend's girlfriend that he was having an affair with. Then he pointed out my shoes, saying, "Those are nice, mate. Can I have them?" Obviously, I said no firmly, but not aggressively. Then said thanks and told him about the fact I got them on sale. He said, "Can I touch them?" Which was immediately a big red flag. I politely declined and he started rubbing my shoe anyway. I was still sitting cross-legged on the bench. Then in one swift movement, he grabbed my ankle, pulled my entire leg up to his face, and put the entire toe of my size 11 Converses into his mouth. At which point, while sitting, stunned silence, I started desperately looking around and I see the hospital police walking over. The officer asks if we were here together. He said yes. I said no. The officer then asked if he was a patient. I said yes. He said no. I told the officer I was just waiting for my taxi and the guy rambled something I couldn't really make out to the officer, who suggested he move along. The guy stood up, gave me a handshake and walked off into the night. The officer obviously asked if I was okay and I told him what happened. He was just as confused as I was. After that, my taxi was due in 5 minutes, so I went and stood on the opposite side of the hospital where the taxi rank was. I asked some friends, who are familiar with a lot of drugs, what he could have been on, and they unanimously said meth. And the shoe thing was probably just a fetish. This happened many years ago. I was 8 or so at the time, and every day I would walk home from my elementary school. My house was a few miles down the road, so my mother thought it would be safe enough for me to walk by myself. It was a few months into the school year when it started happening. A beat-up looking Toyota would slow down enough for a couple of white guys that looked like they were in their mid to late 20s to follow me and yell insults at me. I was chubby back then, so they would call me fat and much more hurtful things. I'll always remember the driver. He looked to be the oldest of the bunch, with greasy blonde hair hanging down and partially covering his pimple-scarred face. They would follow me until I reached the gas station that was halfway along my journey home. Then they would speed off, laughing loudly. For the first couple of weeks, I didn't tell anyone, thinking they would get tired of it. They didn't. A full month passed before I told my mother about it. She, of course, was rightly concerned about me and asked me how long it had been going on for. When I told her a month, she grew even more concerned. Her being a single mom, she couldn't pick me up from school because she was at work all day. So her solution was to send my older brother to meet me halfway, thinking this would deter them. It didn't. Another 4 months went by with them continuing to follow me and throw insults at me. Then suddenly it stopped. A whole month went by without them driving by, and we thought everything was safe again. We were wrong. Suddenly, out of the blue, I saw the old beat-up Toyota heading down the road towards me. Only the driver was in the car this time. He slowed down the car, flung open the passenger door, and proceeded to yell for me to get into the car. I was so scared I couldn't even speak. I just shook my head no and tried to walk faster. He continued to follow me, demanding that I get into his car. I'll never forget the look on his face as he yelled at me. It was full of rage. We finally got to the gas station and I made a break for it. I ran inside the gas station and up to the gas station attendant. I told him what was happening and he let me hide behind the counter. The driver pulled into the gas station, hopped out of the car, and came in. He demanded that the gas station attendant tell him where I was, claiming I was his daughter, and I had jumped out of his car. The gas station attendant glanced down at me and I shook my head wildly, mouthing that I did not know this man. The gas station attendant said he didn't know what he was talking about, and that he had to leave the store immediately. The driver began to yell wildly and started walking around the store looking for me. The gas station attendant said he was going to call the police if the man did not leave. The man turned to him and said something I'll never forget. "I'll get that bitch, one way or another." The driver stormed out of the gas station and left. I sat there on the floor crying for what felt like hours. The gas station attendant called the police and had them come over. When the police arrived, the attendant told them what had happened. A police officer knelt down beside me and asked me my side of the story. I told the officer everything. How him and a couple others had been following me for months. How they would follow me and insult me. How they suddenly stopped and how he tried to get me into his car. I don't remember much afterwards other than them calling my mother and her meeting at our house. They took my mother's statement and then left. After that, my mother changed her work hours in order to come get me every day. For years I lived in fear that that man with the greasy hair and pimple-scarred face would eventually get me. It's hard for me to write this because it has only been a year since it happened. It started in 2014, and it happened in my home country of Sweden, when I went to an art school for a summer course as a form of daily activity. The people at this art school were some of the worst people I have ever met. And that included me because I was kind of trash back then too. I was 21 years old and had little experience of the real world. I'd gone 2 extra years of school because of switching majors and taking an extra year on my second choice, so I was literally on my first year of independence. I also have a light form of autism and didn't receive schooling until I was 12, which made me a bit more slowly developed mentally during high school. I'm all caught up now. Basically, I was a 21-year-old with very little experience in life. The people I met at the art school were not, let's say, the highest of achievers. They were some of the meanest and most terrible people I have ever met. They treated each other, and me, awfully, as well as the teachers. But I was quite the little turd too. In fact, I feel like being around those people made me so much worse. What started the stalking was an incident involving acrylic paint. It was going to be thrown away, so some of us took some of the paint so it wouldn't go to waste, and I finally took the remaining paint. Well, it's over, showed up. Her name was Anna, and this is how she introduced herself. My art teacher was pushing these big tables on a trolley through the narrow passageway of the art hall, and Anna, dressed in expensive designer clothes, stood in her way. So my art teacher, not fearing anything, screams, "Move it." Anna snaps towards her with this crazy look in her eyes and shouts, "Excuse me? Do you know who I am? I'm a famous woman." My art teacher, not impressed, responds with, "Okay, famous woman, move it." That was how we learned of Anna, the famous artist. She then proceeded to have all the terrible people of my class smooge over her and treat her like a celebrity. But her real reason for being there was because of her paint. So the great hunt began. I was roped into it, and my initial plan was to just give her back her paint so she could be off. Except during the hunt, I got these terrifying red flags. She kept sniffing the paint of other people to see if any were hers. Apparently she had poured some kind of oil into the paint so she could sniff her way to where they were. During the hunt, she admitted that she had been put into treatment for the criminally insane because she had stalked a previous schoolmate that she thought had stolen paint from her. She even showed a CCTV video of her old schoolmate pulling a suitcase behind her, saying that's where she had the paint that she stole. I asked her how she got the video, and she said that her dad had connections with the local government, which had gotten the video from one of the local government cameras, which is illegal for a layman to get access to. During this time, she even showed me the court document, which he had saved as a PDF on her phone. During this time, she also admitted that had been sending messages to a famous artist in Oribro because a voice from heaven told her to do it, and that he was destined to help her with her career. Anna also thought that staring wide-eyed made her more attractive, like the kind of stare where you can't see any of the eyelids at all. So while she was saying all this, she had this crazy-eyed look on her face. I was terrified of her, and couldn't figure out a way of handing back the paint, so she ended up threatening to have the principal fired if she couldn't search every room for the paint. And when she did find all of her paint, she put it on one of the school's rooms and said that she would pick it up when she wanted to. She said that she would come every year during the exhibit to check if her paint was still there, and that she would sue the school if she found it missing. What a crazy person. End of story, right? How I wish. About 2 years later, I enrolled in a 1-year basic art program at the school. I had completely forgotten about this crazy person. At one point, we were cleaning out the art rooms, and her paint was brought up again, and it would again be thrown away. Me, not remembering that crazy, famous artist, took a nice crimson bottle for myself while others took some of the not ruined colors. Opened acrylics go bad after a while for themselves. Then as we all tried to continue with our lives, the crazy lady one day returned and started sniffing all the color. I didn't recognize her at all. I had forgotten how dangerously deranged she was. I had even forgotten that I had gotten the crimson color from her paint, so when she started interrogating me for why the paint smelled like hers, I didn't know what to say. She also smelled her paint at some other girl's table, and was harassing her as well. Thinking that this was all more fuss than it was worth, I threw away the crimson paint. It had started to cut from age anyway. And that is when everything went to hell and crazy-eyed Anna became my stalker. When she found out that I had thrown away the paint, she became convinced that I had re-enrolled at the school specifically to steal her paint. She started convincing a bunch of gullible, and to be honest, low-achieving people that this was true, and I started being harassed. It started with a physical attack. I was painting alone in the evening, minding my own business, when this huge brute ran into me, tackled me to the floor, and hit and kicked me. While this was happening, crazy-eyed Anna was fake crying in the corner, but I could see on the floor how she went from fake crying into gleefully smiling as I was being kicked and hit. Another girl she had recruited picked up and smashed my phone, breaking it. As the guy stormed off and the second girl followed, I stumbled onto my feet and asked Anna why she had done this, and the answer she gave me made me realize what kind of person she was. So you will know that I can hurt you if I want. That's the answer she gave me. I later asked the brute why he had attacked me, and he said that he hated people who stole. This guy is training now to become an art teacher. I fear for those children. I had bruised my ribs, but were not allowed to go to the hospital because the principal didn't want to get involved. And since my phone was broken, I couldn't call for an ambulance, so it took so long to get to the hospital that the outside signs of the abuse had healed. During this time, crazy-eyed Anna started wearing a crimson jacket wherever she went. I asked her why she was wearing it, and also said she looked pretty, thinking that talking nicely to her would start a friendly conversation to maybe smooth everything over. Well, Anna is not like normal people and does not think like normal people. Her response was that she wanted me to think of her every time I saw this color, and said that she had seen it work in a movie. She then added, "I am more beautiful than you will ever be." Wherever she went, she had a horde of smoozers around her, all thinking she was some kind of famous and fancy artist. But eventually she had to leave the school, and I thought I had peace. Except, she one day suddenly showed up and gleefully presented me with the school's Russian exchange student. This student had been sitting at my table every day for weeks, and I hadn't paid it any mind because, why would I? She was allowed to sit there, but this is when crazy-eyed Anna drops the bombshell that this exchange student was A, not a real exchange student, and B, she had been putting her phone on the table each mealtime while having it on speaker with Anna on the other end silently listening in on my conversations. I remember when she first told me this, how I didn't believe it. I didn't believe, and a part of me still had a hard time realizing the lengths this woman was going to were real. But it was what she said next that terrified me most. She said, "I know about the secret messages behind your words. I know what you are up to. And I heard a voice from above that told me that it was my mission in life to keep an eye on you and make sure you behave." The abuse at school escalated quickly after this. I was harassed and cornered in every classroom and chased around school, and at the same time I got no help. It escalated into a happening one late weekend night. I was sitting in the school's texture room when a guy suddenly burst in and started running towards me screaming, "What makes you think you can sit there?" He did not go to the school. I jumped out of a window and started running towards my dorm and managed to call 112 in the meantime. The emergency number for Sweden. I managed to scream out that I needed help and where I was. I ran towards my dorm, but another guy was sitting there waiting for me, so I ran towards the head building, but a third guy was waiting there. They cornered me, and I remember how scared I was. I thought I was going to die. But then, a light of hope, blue and red lights from the road. I was saved. I remember how happy I was to see that the police officer, everything would be finally over. And then, he walked up to the girl who orchestrated all of it, Malene, and he greeted her like a friend. And I knew at that moment that he wouldn't save me. I screamed for help and he ignored me. She told him that there was no issue here. He said he was looking forward to seeing her around town. Then he left. He left me. He just drove away. The last thing I remember is the backlights of that police car driving away. I wake up the next morning, laying on the ground with a huge bump on the side of my head. I don't know what happened. Malene claims they never touched me and I just passed out when one of the guys grabbed me. I know better. I know the pain I felt and the huge bump on the side of my head. I called 112 and I called for an ambulance. At this time, because of the abuse, I had memory loss and couldn't quite tell the lady what the issue was. But I made a mistake. I told her that I had called 112 the day after, and that a police officer just left me. And she got mad. Really, really mad. She told me that I was slandering her coworker, and to only call if I actually needed help. And then she hung up. I was alone again, with no one, not a single person on my side. I tried to make a police report against Anna and Malene, but the officer had heard about me and deleted the report. It was during this time that I had enough and thought about ending my own life, so I was forcibly put in a mental health ward. And the stalking didn't stop. Crazy-eyed Anna had a friend of hers be committed so she could come into the ward as a visitor in order to harass me. When I tried to go to art school again, she had people she had threatened join the same program so they could keep an eye on me. At home, she would have another guy she had threatened to park outside my house a few times a week in order to scare me. During this, she would also have things stolen from me. Things like shoes, gloves, and the like, and according to the people doing the stealing, this was because she had watched a movie where someone steals items and then puts them back to make someone go insane from the harassment. Crazy-eyed Anna would call me a few times a year lying about being a data collector to get private information out of me, something that took a few years to even catch on to. Because she lived in a big city far away at the time, she constantly forced others to do the stalking for her. Most of them had at one point given drugs to, and then would get them to do what she wanted by threatening to report them to the police if they wouldn't. Others, she would just bribe with money or charm. I've gone for hour-long bus rides where someone admits to being there for her sake. Most people are afraid of her because she won't leave them alone, and she will do to them what she does to me if they don't say yes to her. One girl was roped into standing all dressed in red outside my supermarket. Another girl was also roped into sitting with her car outside my house for hours a few days a week, all because of the fear of this woman. I learned from a cousin of hers that she affords all of this because she won an art prize for $500,000 at one point. It's why she thinks she is famous. I also learned that most of her biological family has cut contact with her because she has been doing this since she was a teenager. And yet, even with that information, no one would listen. When I tell people what she had done to me, people call me the crazy one. I have no history of delusions or of making up tall tales, yet it was so much easier for people to just think that I'm crazy. I have even been forcefully medicated at some points with psychosis medication that baffled doctors lamented over not working. Not even my family believes me. Something that has forever bared how much trust I can put into the relationship between us. I asked her once why she was doing all of this, and she said, "To punish you." I asked her how long I would need to be punished, and she answered, "For as long as I want." At one point, I even considered killing her. I am the kind of person who catches flies alive in a cup and let them out the window. I have never harmed another human being. I have never been violent. Yet at one point felt so desperate for freedom that I would take prison, rather than being haunted by crazy-eyed Anna anymore. I was more afraid of her than of prison. Then it stopped. It just stopped. Still a year later, I don't know why it stopped. Nothing in her history tells me that she would stop willingly. So I'm convinced that either she has run out of people to threaten into doing her bidding, or something has happened to her. It's possible that one of those people finally reported her and actually got taken seriously. I don't know. Even so, I can't feel relief. Not yet. I'm still afraid it will start again, and I have given up all hope of being taken seriously by the police. This happened way back in October of 2006. At that time, I was just a 19-year-old kid always on the lookout for adventure. One Friday night after wrapping up my shift at McDonald's, I met up with some friends who suggested we check out this haunted location called White's Bridge. My one buddy Brandon said he had recently learned about it and began telling us the legends associated with the 100-year-old wood-covered bridge. Never one to turn down a spooky experience, we all piled into my green Ford Taurus and headed out on our journey. Brandon gave directions, guiding me off the main road, and within minutes we were on the dirt back roads, surrounded by woods and cornfields. Our only point of reference was a blinking cell tower off in the distance. We could tell we were getting further from the city as our cell phones began slowly losing service. As we rode deeper and deeper into what legitimately felt like the absolute middle of nowhere, Brandon repeated the legend associated with the bridge. Back in the early 1900s, a local farmer discovered that his beloved wife had been cheating on him, and in a fit of rage he killed her and her lover after discovering them in the act. After committing the cold-blooded murder, the farmer left his home and wandered the dirt roads in a daze. He eventually came upon White's Bridge, where the realization of what he had done finally began to sink in, and deciding he would rather die than face the consequences of his actions, he hoisted a rope up and over one of the bridge's rafters and hung himself. As far as I can tell now, the story is complete fiction, but we totally believed it at the time. After a long and bumpy ride, Brandon instructed me to turn right on an off-road I wouldn't have even noticed was there had he not pointed it out. I took the turn and there before us was White's Bridge. It looked like something straight out of a horror film. An old wood-covered bridge, aged by time, sitting alone above a river deep in the middle of nowhere. We parked the car on the side of the road and got out to explore. Immediately catching our eyes was a scarecrow lying abandoned at the entrance to the bridge. My friend Mike, who was known as somewhat of a risk-taker, and a stupid one at that, picked up the scarecrow and lit it on fire. The hay body burst up into a ball of flames and Mike waved it around proudly next to the old dry wood bridge. Realizing the risk, I told him to throw the damn thing in the river and put it out, which thankfully he did. After making sure there weren't any rogue embers that could ignite the bridge, Brandon suggested we get back in the car and pull it onto the bridge. He explained that the legend was that if you parked your car in the middle of the bridge, put it in neutral and killed the engine, the spirit of the dead farmer would push the vehicle forward to get it off the bridge. Naturally, we had to try this. We piled back in and did exactly as he said. We parked halfway across the rickety old bridge and killed the engine. We sat in the pitch black, saying nothing, waiting for something, anything to happen. The only sounds were the creaking of the bridge, the river flowing beneath us, and footsteps. Suddenly the back driver's side door opens and a woman abruptly enters the back seat, cramming in next to my two friends back there. She looked to be in her late 20s/early 30s. Long straight black hair, slim and wearing a plaid shirt and blue jeans. It's been a while, but this is essentially how I remember the conversation going. "I saw your fire signal for me," she said. Wait, what?" I replied, totally freaked out and at a complete loss for words. "I'm so glad you came. My boyfriend's car broke down that way. I need a ride back." My brain was doing its best to compute the situation. "I'm sorry, but who are you?" I asked. "What are you doing here?" "I told you," she responded curtly. "My boyfriend's car broke down over there. Can you please just give me a ride so I don't have to walk all the way back?" She was pointing ahead, towards a narrow road that forked off to the right on the other side of the bridge. My friend Mike, the scarecrow burner, and ever the gentleman added, "I mean, if you need a place to stay, you're more than welcome to come crash at my place. I got plenty to drink and..." I interrupted him. "No, lady, listen. I'm sorry. I don't know who you are. You just got in my car and this is all really weird. You could be an axe murderer for all I know and... I'm sorry. You have to get out." She glared at me in the rearview mirror. If looks could kill, I would have been done for. "But you signaled for me." She responded in an irritated tone. "We weren't signaling for you. Get out." She let out an angry sigh and got out, walking back in the direction from which she came and disappearing into the night. I started the engine right up and looked at my friends. They all had looks of disbelief on their face. Without saying a word, I put the car in drive and slowly rolled forward and off the bridge. We needed to turn around and go back across the bridge to get back to where we had come from, and the only way to do that was to pull off onto the side road that the woman said her boyfriend's car had broken down on, and then reverse. As I pulled onto the side road, my headlights illuminated the 3 posted signs that I hadn't been able to see from the bridge. No trespassing, private property, and do not enter. Looking up the road, there was no sign of the woman. Wherever she went, it didn't appear she went that way. I didn't want to stick around, though, so I backed up and crossed the bridge again, and from there began the journey back home. We didn't have much to say on the ride home. I think we were all equally stunned, except for Mike, who asked if he knew anyone that would be awake at this hour that he could score some weed from. I visited White's Bridge a couple other times after that, but nothing of note happened in my subsequent visits. Sadly, some delinquents burned down the old White Bridge some years ago. It was rebuilt from what I hear. It's just not the same as the original. I don't have any plans to go and check it out. This happened when I was in my early 20s. I was working in a retail store in a mall, but there wasn't enough hours, so I asked if there was anything else I could do. And my boss told me that the location at the other mall needed more help, so I could go there on my weekends. I decided to take the bus route that was a bit longer, but that I didn't have to make any transfers. So I got up early and caught the earliest one I could. The bus ride was fairly normal. I got to see parts of my city I hadn't seen before. I did notice that the bus eventually went into a more dingy neighborhood. There was more trash everywhere, abandoned buildings, houses, and cars, etc. I noticed it, but I felt like I was safely on the bus and my destination was in a nice neighborhood. At some point, an elderly lady got on the bus and I noticed that no one was getting up to offer her a seat, so I gave her mine and went to go hold the pole next to the side door of the bus and continued on my way. While riding, I remember looking at a guy next to me and asking if he knew about how much longer it would take to get to my stop. But before he answered, someone hit the buzzer to get off. The doors next to me opened, and then I felt hands on my free arm grabbing me and pulling me. I on reflex immediately clenched up because I generally don't like any physical contact with strangers outside of a greeting handshake. And I really think that reflex saved my life because it took my brain a few seconds to register that someone was trying to pull me off the bus. A tall man in a white tank top, blue jeans, and white tennis shoes had come out of the back of the bus, grabbed my arm, and tried to drag me off the bus. He had pulled me down to the second step before I even understood what was going on, and I was just barely still hanging on to the pole. The arm he was grabbing had my purse on it, and I actually tried to shake my purse down to him so he'd let go, but he had no interest in my purse. I had just about started calling for help when I felt someone grab my waist and pull me back up towards the bus. The man trying to pull me down must have realized that he couldn't get me without this dragging out longer than he expected, so he finally gave up and ran off. That was that. The guy ran off, the door shut, and I vaguely remember hearing the man who saved me say something along the lines of, "You would die in that neighborhood." And I had apparently gone into some kind of shock because I only remember saying, "Oh." I don't even remember thanking him. I didn't say anything to the driver. I didn't contact the police like I should have. I don't even remember my shift at that other location. I don't remember the ride home. It was like I was numb. It was when I was at home. I completely showered and gotten ready for bed in my nightgown that I sat at the edge of my bed and thought, did I almost get kidnapped? I almost got kidnapped. I have a lot of regrets about all of this. I regret not contacting the police in case that guy goes after another woman. At least women would be aware that he was out there. I regret not thanking and keeping in contact with that nice person who saved me. I actually posted an article in my local CL in hopes of him somehow hearing it, and knowing how grateful I am to him. This story takes place when I was around 16 to 17 years old. I lived with just my dad in a little apartment in a questionable area. It was the type of area you'd not want to be out and about when the sun goes down. Up until a certain time, like 10 to 11 p.m., there would be a cop or two in the area patrolling and making sure there are no gang-related activities going on. I had a job at a restaurant in the city, which was about a 30-minute car ride and an hour-and-a-half train ride. The train was a couple of blocks away from my place, and since my dad was always too lazy or hungover to drive me, That was my main form of transportation. I went to work around 3 p.m. and would usually get home around 12 or 1 a.m. This was my schedule 4 days a week aside from having school. I would see a lot of familiar faces on the train because of this, but we never really made conversation with each other. Until one night when I got out of work late because some assholes wanted to sit in the restaurant past closing. Thanks to them, I missed my train. The next one wasn't scheduled to arrive for another hour, so having nowhere to go and no money for Lyft or Uber, I sat there waiting. No one was around me, so when this older man showed up, kind of staggering a bit, I assumed he was another drunken hobo in the city trying to catch a train to sleep in. Something about his face gave me déjà vu, but I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I've just seen him on the train here and there. He made his way over to me, much to my discomfort, and started up a conversation. He wasn't slurring, but the way he was looking down at me gave me goosebumps. He asked me why I was out there so late, all by myself. I had to reply as to not anger him. I mean, we were alone, and he was close enough to me to pull out a knife or something. Anyway, I told him I was waiting for the train, and he asked which one. Now, the train was color-coded with a strip at the top to indicate whether it goes to north, south, east, or west areas. I took blue. But I lied and said I took green. He looked at the schedule above the benches and saw that the green train was coming in 15 minutes. So he said he'd keep me company. For those extremely long 15 minutes, he asked me how long I had been working at so-so restaurants. This made my blood run ice cold. I never told him where I worked. I just looked at him and very timidly answered, "For a year." And he laughed. He said, "Wow, it's already been a whole year, huh?" At this point, my skin was itching out of anxiety, and as soon as the green train came, I knew I had no choice but to take it. I said goodbye to him and thanked him for the chat, hoping that would be the end of it. Nope. He suddenly told me that he took the green train too, so he followed me on and sat in a seat behind me. My mind was racing about whether he was going to try and do something to me like chloroform me or hurt me some other way, but we rode the train in silence. I was trying to figure out how I was going to lose him. There weren't many people riding the train at that hour. Our car was empty, unfortunately. As the ride went on in menacing silence, I could feel him staring down the back of my head. I waited until we got to a stop where there was another person, and I was so relieved to see a woman sitting there. She was boarding, so I immediately got off the train and the man followed me, as expected. I took a seat on a bench next to hers, close enough for her to see and hear everything going on, hoping she would catch on. The man noticed that I was sniffling, allergies plus being out in the cold, and asked if I was sick. I told him no, but he insisted on giving me these weird pills he had that were supposedly cold medicine. I declined in a louder voice, "Sorry, I don't take pills from strangers." This prompted the lady to look at us, and I made eye contact with her. She knew now. Now this went on until a blue train came and the lady got up, giving me a look that told me to get on with her. So without explanation, I did. She waved me over to sit next to her, and when the man tried to follow, she said, "No, you go sit over there," and made him sit a couple of seats across from us. He chose the one where he could face us and stared at me the entire time. I was shaking and about to burst into tears. The woman leaned over and whispered to me that she had a pistol. I felt safer with her there. We whispered back and forth about what happened. I told her where I lived and how I was worried he would follow me home. She told me a friend of hers would be boarding the train soon, and when he did, she told me his name was Ray. Ray was filled in about everything and agreed to escort me home. She promised me that I could trust him. The two of them waited with me until I got to my stop. The man, still watching me, started to smile widely, resembling the Cheshire Cat. He shouted, "This is your place, right?" To which I didn't respond and just gave the woman a hug and thanked her. Ray and I hurriedly hopped off the train, and as I looked back, I saw that the woman had pulled out her pistol and told the man to sit back down. even blocking the exit with her body. I finally let myself cry in relief. Ray walked me home and tried to calm me down by telling me about his job and his family. After watching me get inside the gates of my apartment safely, I thanked him profusely for his help. It chills me to think about how that night would have turned out if I hadn't met up with that woman and her friend. I feel extremely lucky to this day. I never saw that man again and eventually stopped thinking about him, but in the back of my head, that creepy, aroused smile of his was burned into my mind. I couldn't help but wonder just what else he knew about me. I took in a hitchhiker that turned out to be crazy, as in legit crazy. I will never do that again, and hopefully my experience will discourage you to do that too. I live in a foreign country, and I don't know about your country's sanitary measures against the pandemic, but at that time we were no longer confined. It happened in September of last year. I was driving from my parents' house to a friend's apartment near our college campus. It was an hour-and-a-half drive out there. We had plans to spend the week together after not seeing each other for months. Even though the incident is not related to my friends in any way, it just hit me how dangerous it actually was when I started telling them what had happened. I remember one of them saying this must have been the worst 45-minute drive of my life. I laughed at it back then, but it hits me now how true it was. I left quite late that day, around 9 p.m., because I remember the sun had already set, and I was going to arrive late, which I didn't like. But I was used to the road as I had often taken it. For some context, it was an hour-and-a-half drive, and I would usually stop midway in a McDonald's parking lot to smoke a cigarette before carrying on. This is important for later in the story. I saw the hitchhiker not long after I left my parents' house. I had driven for 10 to 15 minutes or so when I saw him at the exit of a roundabout. It was a tall, slender guy with one of those tiny shoulder bag guys wear across the chest. I thought it was a guy in his 20s that had just been dropped off by his friends on his way back from a party or something. Which was stupid because it was still too early for a party to end, but that's the first thought I had, and I immediately felt sympathy and stopped. I opened the passenger window and asked where he was going. I realized right away that he was way older than I thought, at least in his 30s. He had a really pale face, and the way he looked at me honestly freaked me out. The guy was going in my direction, to the town where I would stop midway to take a break. I don't know what I was thinking, to be honest. I just responded automatically it was on my way, and he opened the door. And I had the worst 45 minutes of my life. I don't mean to be dramatic, but it really was hell. I knew right away I had made a mistake as I drove off because as soon as I started driving, he held his stomach tight, crouched himself in the passenger seat, doing back and forth, saying he wasn't feeling good. I offered to open the windows for some fresh air. He said he had to take his meds, which he didn't. Saying I felt uncomfortable is an understatement. I remember thinking I had screwed up and that whatever happened, I should not stop under any circumstances. The last thing I did was to ask him if he would be okay if I dropped him off at the city's McDonald's. It had a light and parking lot. There were always people there until midnight, so I could leave immediately onto a fast road. I think he agreed, but either way, it didn't matter because I wasn't planning on stopping elsewhere. I was already freaked out. Though I pretended to focus on the road and tried to appear as calm as I could. And he kept talking during this whole time. I don't remember in what order it happened exactly, but I remember he asked me if I could look at my nails. I had no nail polish, to which I responded I was driving. He apologized, said I shouldn't worry because he had never raped anyone. He told me his girlfriend was mad at him, wanted to break up with him if he didn't come back, asked where I was going, what I was planning to do tonight, if I was planning to have a long, steaming bath, if I had a boyfriend, how we liked to do it. I said that was private and that I did not want to answer. He nodded, said he used to be young too until he got arrested. This is not a typo. Young until arrested were his words. He insisted twice that we were followed by cars. Asked me if I smoked weed. I said no. He offered me a cigarette. I said that was nice, but he didn't have to. He left a cigarette on the board. He took out his phone at one point and wanted me to show a picture of him. And a picture of his mom, saying she was beautiful. I took a quick glimpse and the freaking thing was broken. Like it had multiple straight black lines of broken pixels and it was reddish on the left and yellowish on the right, which made the picture really creepy. He got mad at that point because I was just taking a quick glimpse and he started talking louder, saying I didn't give a fuck about what he was saying. I straight up said, "I'm listening. I can't watch. I'm driving." He calmed down immediately, said, "Okay, sorry," and wanted to show me another picture. He asked if it was my car. I said it was my parents'. Somehow I did not want him to think I was rich or had any kind of money. I am just a poor, old, in-debt student. Leave me alone. I lied, saying I hit a deer last week, which is a lie. My mom had, but that memory came in handy, and I was trying to focus and pay attention because I didn't want to break my parents' car. I had hoped he shut up. He didn't. At some point, he was just straight up staring at me, and he muttered, "Poor thing." And then he straightened up and pointed to a roadside in panic, saying, "I'm at the road sign. Poor road sign." Honestly, I think at that point I was thinking if he ever tried anything, I would crash this car and both of us in a tree. Because if I could not make it out of it, neither would he. I am ashamed to say this, but I didn't get him to get out of this easily. He screamed his name was Archangel Michael. He asked my name. I gave him a fake one. Said something like, "Michael, right?" And crouched myself again in panic, going back and forth, saying I shouldn't know his name. I just said, "Okay." To be honest, that was the only thing I would say in the end. When we came into the city where he had to stop, he asked if I could take him to the train station. It was almost 10 p.m. and I knew there were no trains. No lights and surely no other cars or human presence. I told him we had said he would stop at McDonald's. He nodded, yes. He said I was nice. Put a coin on the board next to the cigarette. I stopped in the parking lot. Did not park. Just stopped right there in the middle of the way, where I felt it was the most exposed. He just left saying, "See you later." And I drove away very fast. Never saw or heard of him again. I hope you will never take a hitchhiker in. I know I won't. I'm a girl, and this happened when I was 20 in the early 2000s. People used landlines and cell phones were not unlimited. This happened in a town about an hour away from Sacramento. My friend was house sitting for a family that her family was friends with from church. She was to house sit in the country just outside of town for a week. They had animals like cats, rabbits, a donkey, and a horse. The family also had dogs, but the family took the dogs with them. My friend was in charge of feeding the animals and watching the place. She didn't have to get the mail daily, because they had this metal lockbox style mailbox down their long driveway. They didn't have any neighbors for miles, just fields of alfalfa, cattle, and corn. So I guess the lockbox was for safety. Towards the end of the week, she asked if I wanted to spend the night and keep her company, and I thought it sounded like fun. I had moved out of my aunts and uncles and gotten my own apartment, so I told her I'd pick her up on the way there after I got out of work. We got there around 9:30 p.m., grabbing dinner on the way. We went into the barn first thing and fed the animals. It was late for their dinner, and they made their hunger known with the animal noises. We made sure they had water, then went inside. The house was this big ranch-style house. Single story. The living room was to your left as you walked into the home. There was a long hallway directly to the right of the entrance that led to where the bathroom and bedrooms were. Straight ahead was a dining area, and to the left of that was the kitchen area and patio door. They did not have an open floor plan. In the kitchen, on the opposite side from the dining area, was a long hall that had several doors. My friend explained that the wife ran a daycare center out of the house. These rooms were play areas for the kids she took care of. We didn't bother going over there because we had no interest. We watched some TV, ate our leftovers, and talked about people we knew. As it got later, she turned on the house alarm and said she didn't like sleeping in other people's beds. So she had been sleeping on the couch, then offered it to me. She would sleep on one of the two huge recliners that reclined so far back it was almost flat. Chairs were really comfortable, so I just said I'd take the chair. I went and laid back in a chair with my blanket. We turned off the TV, and were talking for maybe 20 minutes in the dark when the motion sensor floodlights started shining through the window, lighting up the room. Now, I really have no idea why people in the country think it's okay not to have curtains or blinds, because to me that's insane. We both got quiet and Amanda says, maybe it was one of the cats. Then we start hearing gravel crunch, like a person walking across gravel in the parking area outside. My chair was closest to the window and I slid carefully down to the floor, clutching the stupid blanket the whole time. The floodlight timed out and my friend slid to the floor too. We laid on our stomachs in the dark, not knowing what to do for a minute, when we heard a loud bang and all of a sudden the house alarm started blaring and the floodlights turned on again. It was so loud we covered our ears and I started to panic. I swear I have never been so close to peeing my pants in my life. I began crawling towards the keypad for the security because I've seen the commercials. There's a button you push and a person responds to you in case of an emergency, or at least sends the police. The main screen says, patio 1 of 2 open. Amanda starts to cry a little and hits the call assistance button on the pad and nothing happens. There's no assistance. I ask her where the phone is, and she says there's a phone in the kitchen and one in the parents' room down the hall. So our choices are to get to the kitchen past the windows and next to one of the patio doors, or to go down the hall to the parents' room and use the phone there. I asked her where the other patio is and she said it was in the daycare part of the house. It was an easy decision. We go inside the parents' room and it's pitch black. I ask her where the phone and she says, I think we have to turn on a light. I really don't want to turn on a light but have no choice. I don't have a flashlight and I didn't bring my cell because I had limited minutes. It was a simpler time and Amanda didn't even get her own cell until after this happened. She turns on the light and we start looking around the room. Not only did these people not have curtains on any window, but they didn't have closet doors. We see a golf club leaning against the wall by the bed. They probably have it instead of a baseball bat, which is what I had next to my bed at home. We figure if we hit someone with it, it's going to leave a mark. She grabs it and we continue our search for the phone. Looking at the obvious places, we find a cordless phone stand, minus the actual phone. The alarm is still raging. We have a light on, and the person who opened the patio door is bound to notice, is all I'm thinking at this point. She asks, should we use the locate phone buttons? I look at her and respond, yeah, if you want some strange guy coming in here with it and asking us if we were looking for something. I'm getting mad that I'm scared and in this situation. Standing there knowing that we have to go to the kitchen, the house alarm stops. It gets country quiet. If you lived in the country, you know what I'm talking about. There isn't another golf club for me to grab, so I make her go out first, flipping every light on and keeping the doors we pass in the hall closed. We double check the security panel and it still says patio open. Hit call button and it still doesn't work. Double checking the front door is locked, we start for the kitchen. I tell her we have to check the patio near the kitchen, and I grab a big knife that wasn't even close to being sharp from the kitchen. We check the patio door near the kitchen and it's locked. We turn on all the lights and grab the phone and dial 911. The phone isn't a cordless phone. It's one of the old ones with a cord attached on a wall. My friend is on the phone with a dispatcher telling her what happened, and I hear a whistle coming from outside the kitchen window. The thing people don't think about, because I didn't in my thinking that safety was turning on the lights, is, well, you have the reflection of the inside of the window. People on the outside have a clear view of you, unless you press your face against the window. I hear the whistle again. It sounds like someone trying to get someone's attention kind of whistle. But I don't see anything outside, and I'm not pressing my face to the window to see if the person there whistling is for me. My friend is still talking to the dispatcher and is crying and is saying she doesn't have the address to the house. She hands me the phone and I say, "Hello?" The dispatcher lady, who sounds annoyed, tells me she needs an address to send police to. I ask that she trace the call and she says something like, "You're house sitting and you don't even know where you're at?" Scared, angry, and overwhelmed, I hand the phone back to Amanda and start looking for something with an address in the kitchen. I'm looking in the junk drawer, on the counter, on the refrigerator, fully keeping an eye down the hall that has the daycare rooms, knowing that on the other side of one of those doors is a patio door that was opened. Amanda tells the lady that she doesn't pick up the mail because of their lockbox, and then a few seconds later removes the phone from her ear and stares at me with a blank face. I ask her if they're tracing the call because I cannot find anything with an address. Amanda tells me, "She said I hope the police find you in time," and hung up the phone. I was now really scared and angry at the same time. We knew that there were people outside. We knew that the patio door to the daycare area was opened. We did not know what to do. We stood in the kitchen silent for what seemed like forever, but was probably 1 minute. I picked up the phone and dialed 411. I told Amanda that they would have the number to the police department. As calmly as I could, I explained what was happening to us to 411. I included the 911 dispatcher and said we really needed the phone number of the town's police department. When we heard a huge metal bang outside the kitchen window by the patio door, it sounded like someone dropped something metal and heavy. Amanda started crying and I couldn't hold in my fear anymore and started crying too. The 411 operator said they were connecting us and would stay on the line with us after getting pissed at the 911 dispatcher on our behalf. A police officer answered the phone and the 411 operator started explaining what was happening to the police. They were asked to disconnect once we had an established connection. The police asked a few questions and we heard the whistle again outside and floodlights all around the house turned on again. I was too scared to look outside, and we had never turned on the patio light because we had to walk past the patio window to get to the switch. We told the policeman on the phone about the whistle, and he said that there should be several policemen showing up shortly and stay on the phone. We were just outside the town limits and knew it might take a few minutes. Having an officer on the phone made me feel a little better, but I was still really scared. He told us that the police arrived and were coming up the drive. The policeman said to put down the phone and open the door, so I did. What I saw was a police pickup truck with spotlights flashing into the pastures that ran along both sides of the drive. 2 officers, not with handguns but with shotguns, walking slowly beside the truck as it came up the long drive. 4 officers approached the house asking us our names. One went to the phone and said they were here and hung up the phone. They ordered us to stay in the dining room and began searching the house and property. One by one they returned. The last one came back in through the patio door by the kitchen. He said he searched the barn and the horse scared him and the horse also looked spook. He asked what other animals were in the barn. They told us they didn't find anyone and that the daycare patio was not locked. There was, however, a broom handle in the track to prevent it from being opened too far. I looked at the patio door that the officer entered in and saw that there was not a broom handle, and that one then felt dumb because he just walked through it. They lectured Amanda about not knowing the address of the house she was supposed to be responsible for, and other stuff I don't remember. After finishing statements, they said they'd stick around and look more, and if we wanted to leave, we could. They could lock the bottom lock, but not activate the alarm, and we were cool with that. We were out of there so fast. We got into my car and went to her mom's. So mentally exhausted we fell asleep and I went to my office job the next morning. She said she really didn't want to go back to the house, but she had to feed the animals their breakfast. Her mom told her to take her sister and she did. That afternoon she called me at work. She was really nervous and began telling me that when they went into the house, there was footprints and poop on the carpet. I said it was probably the cop that checked the barn. She said that she didn't know or pay attention. Also, she said that when they went into the barn to feed and water the animals in the morning, someone had tied all the rabbit legs together in their hutches. They had 10 rabbits the kids used for 4-H. Amanda then continues to say there was a note with the word lucky scribbled on the back of a pizza coupon she thought came from the refrigerator door because the flyer was missing a coupon. It took a while for them to untie the rabbits, and Amanda asked her mom to find someone else from their church to finish the house sitting. She wasn't going back. She also told the officer what she came back to, but no one was ever caught, and the police never called either of us to update us. This story takes place back in April 2018. I live on Long Island and was in my freshman year of high school. I was going through a tough time. Earlier in the week, my girlfriend broke up with me because of rumors she heard about me, which I won't share on here. There was a lot of drama going around my life at this time. Depression, broken hearts, typical high school bullshit. My mom knew I was down in the dumps, so one night she took me to get a new phone in the nearby mall. I have an iPhone 5 at the time, going to an iPhone 8, so I needed a new one. We were gone for about an hour. We returned home with my dog greeting us. Let me tell you something about my dog. He's a short, stocky golden retriever who's never violent or vicious in any way. This is important for later. My dad was still at work, so it was my duty to take out the trash. I went through the front door with my dog resting on the porch, and I went to the side of my house to throw out the trash. When I was throwing the bag, I look over to my neighbor's house where I saw a guy dressed in all black around 6 foot, walking out of their side door. Being a paranoid 14-year-old, I had so many red flags going off. Let me tell you something about my neighbors and my neighborhood. I live in a safe neighborhood, but not 15 minutes away from walking distance. We live by a town that has a high crime rate ranging from muggings, drug dealing, and even murders from time to time. My neighbors, on the other hand, have an older stepson who drag races in the part of town, so for some stupid reason, I wasn't in the fight or flight mode yet because I was assuming that this could be one of his friends. Stupid of me, I know. Until there was another man, and then another. There were 6 guys dressed in all black coming out of the house and from the backyard. Then I knew what was going on, so I tried walking away as I saw nothing. When I was on my driveway, I saw 2 of the 6 guys slowly walking towards me. My blood went cold within a second as they were getting close. My dog went running off the porch, chasing the 6 men down the street, into the night. My dog came back, and I was still standing on my driveway trying to process what I just saw. I went back inside with my mom, asking me what just happened. I told her what I saw with the 6 men coming out of the neighbor's house and heading towards me. We called the police and they came over to ask me questions. I described the men as best as I could. The police told us we're not the first to experience this, as there were 7 burglaries all over town at the time, and I probably witnessed them attempting to break in. I told the officers about 2 of the guys walking toward me after I saw them. They told me that since I saw them, they were trying to stop a witness. That was basically a friendly way of them saying that the burglars were going to kill me, since I saw what they were doing. As typical as this could get, the best they could do was a police report. I was always afraid of break-ins, but I never thought I would experience one. To this day, I'm still surprised at how harmless my golden retriever saved my life that night. It shows me that no matter where you are in this world, this shit could happen anywhere. 4 years have gone by. My family now has a gun, and I am currently training in kickboxing for self-defense.